Western Australia is a state occupying the entire western third of Australia. It is bounded by the Indian Ocean to the north and west, the Great Australian Bight and Southern Ocean to the south, the Northern Territory to the northeast, and South Australia to the southeast. Western Australia is Australia's largest state with a total land area of 2,529,875 square kilometres, and the second largest country subdivision in the world. However, a significant part of it is sparsely populated. The state has about 2.6 million inhabitants, around 11% of the national total. 92% of the population lives in the southwest corner of the state. The first European visitor to Western Australia was the Dutch explorer.The, who visited the Western Australian coast in 1616. The first European settlement of Western Australia occurred following the landing by Major Edmund Lockyer on 25 December 1826 on an expedition on behalf of the New South Wales colonial government. He established a convict-supported military garrison at King George III Sound, at present-day Albany, and on 21 January 1827 formally took possession of the western third of the continent for the British Crown. This was followed by the establishment of the Swan River Colony in 1829, including the site of the present-day capital, Perth. York was the first inland settlement in Western Australia. Situated 97 kilometres east of Perth, it was settled on 16 September 1831. Western Australia achieved responsible government in 1890, and federated with the other British colonies in Australia in 1901. Today its economy mainly relies on mining, agriculture and tourism. The state produces 46% of Australia's exports. Western Australia is the second largest iron ore producer in the world. Geography. Western Australia is bounded to the east by longitude 129 degrees east, the meridian 129 degrees east of Greenwich, which defines the border with South Australia and the Northern Territory, and bounded by the Indian Ocean to the west and north. The International Hydrographic Organization designates the body of water south of the continent as part of the Indian Ocean. In Australia, it is officially gazetted as the Southern Ocean. The total length of the state's eastern border is 1,862 kilometers. There are 20,781 kilometers of coastline, including 7,892 kilometers of island coastline. The total land area occupied by the state is 2.5 million square kilometers. Natural history. Geology. The bulk of Western Australia consists of the extremely old Yilgarn Craton and Pilbara Craton, which merged with the Deccan Plateau of India, Madagascar and the Karen-Zimbabwe Cratons of southern Africa in the Archean Eon to form one of the oldest supercontinents on Earth, because the only mountain building since then has been of the Stirling Range with the rifting from Antarctica. The land is extremely eroded and ancient, with no part of the state above 1,245 meters AHD. Most of the state is a low plateau with an average elevation of about 400 meters, very low relief, and no surface runoff. This descends relatively sharply to the coastal plains, in some cases forming a sharp escarpment. The extreme age of the landscape has meant that the soils are remarkably infertile and frequently laterized. Even soils derived from granitic bedrock contain an order of magnitude less available phosphorus and only half as much nitrogen as soils in comparable climates in other continents. Soils derived from extensive sand plains or ironstone are even less fertile, nearly devoid devoid of soluble phosphate and also deficient in zinc, copper, molybdenum and sometimes potassium and calcium. The infertility of most of the soils has required heavy application by farmers of chemical fertilizers, particularly superphosphate, insecticides and herbicides. These have resulted in damage to invertebrate and bacterial populations. The grazing and use of hoofed mammals and, later, heavy machinery through the years have resulted in compaction of soils and great damage to the fragile soils. Large-scale land clearing for agriculture has damaged habitats for native flora and fauna. As a result, the southwest region of the state has a higher concentration of rare, threatened or endangered flora and fauna than many areas of Australia, making it one of the world's biodiversity hotspots. Large areas of the state's wheat belt region have problems with dryland salinity and the loss of fresh water. Climate: the southwest coastal area has a Mediterranean climate. It was originally heavily forested, including large stands of karri, one of the tallest trees in the world. This agricultural region is one of the 9 most biodiverse terrestrial habitats, with a higher proportion of endemic species than most other equivalent regions. Thanks to the offshore Luan current, the area is one of the top 6 regions for marine biodiversity and contains the most southerly coral reefs in the world. Average annual rainfall varies from 300 mm at the edge of the wheat belt region to 1,400 mm in the wettest areas near North Cliff, but from November to March, evaporation exceeds rainfall, and it is generally very dry. Plants are adapted to this, as well as the extreme poverty of all soils. The central 2/3 of the state is arid and sparsely inhabited. The only significant economic activity is mining. Annual rainfall averages less than 300 mm, most of which occurs in sporadic torrential falls related to cyclone events in summer. An exception to this is the northern tropical regions. The Kimberley has an extremely hot monsoonal climate with average annual rainfall ranging from 500 to 1,500 mm, but there is a very long, almost rainless season from April to November. 85% of the state's runoff occurs in the Kimberley, but because it occurs in violent floods and because of the insurmountable poverty of the generally shallow soils, the only development has taken place along the Ord River. Snow is rare in the state and typically occurs only in the Stirling Range near Albany, as it is the only mountain range far enough south and sufficiently elevated. More rarely, snow can fall on the nearby Parongarup Range. Snow outside these areas is a major event. It usually occurs in hilly areas of southwestern Australia. The most widespread low-level snow occurred on the 26th of June 1956 when snow was reported in the Perth Hills, as far north as Wongan Hills and as far east as Salmon Gums. However, even in the Stirling Range, snowfalls rarely exceed 5 cm and rarely settle for more than one day. The highest observed maximum temperature of 50.5 degrees Celsius was recorded at Mardy Station on the 19th of February 1998. The lowest minimum temperature recorded was -7.2 degrees Celsius at Airbird Observatory on the 17th of August 2008. Flora and fauna: Western Australia is home to around 540 species of birds. Of these, around 15 are endemic to the state. The best areas for birds are the southwestern corner of the state and the area around Broome and the Kimberley. The flora of Western Australia comprises 9,437 published native vascular plant species of 1,543 genera within 226 families. There are also 1,171 naturalized alien or invasive plant species, more commonly known as weeds. In the southwest region are some of the largest numbers of plant species for its area in the world. Specific ecoregions of Western Australia include the sandstone gorges of the Kimberley on the northern coast, and below that areas of dry grassland are semi-desert, with Tanami Desert inland from there. Following the coast south there is the Southwest Australia savanna and a Swan coastal plain around Perth, and then farther south the Warren on the southwest corner of the coast around the wine-growing area of Margaret River. Going east along the southern ocean coast is the Goldfields Esperance region, including the Esperance grasslands and the Coolgardie grasslands inland around town of Coolgardie. History. The first inhabitants of Australia arrived from the north about 40,000 to 60,000 years ago. Over thousands of years they eventually spread across the whole land mass. These indigenous Australians were long established throughout Western Australia by the time European explorers began to arrive in the early 17th century. The first European to visit Western Australia was a Dutch explorer, Dirk Hartog, who on the 25th of October 1616 landed at what is now known as Cape Inscription, Dirk Hartog Island. For the rest of the 17th century, other Dutch and British navigators encountered the coast, usually unintentionally, as demonstrated by the many shipwrecks along the coast of ships that deviated from the Brow route. 200 years passed before Europeans believed that the great southern continent actually existed. By the late 18th century, British and French sailors had begun to explore the Western Australian coast. The origins of the present state began with the establishment by Lockyer of a convict-supported settlement from New South Wales at King George III Sound. The settlement was formally annexed on the 21st of January 1827 by Lockyer when he commanded the Union Jack be raised and a feu de joie fired by the troops. The settlement was founded in response to British concerns about the possibility of a French colony being established on the coast of Western Australia. On the 7th of March 1831 it was transferred to the control of the Swan River Colony, and named Albany in 1832. In 1829 the Swan River Colony was established on the Swan River by Captain James Stirling. By 1832, the British settler population of the colony had reached around 1,500, and the official name of the colony was changed to Western Australia. The two separate town sites of the colony developed slowly into the port city of Fremantle and the state's capital, Perth. York was the first inland settlement in Western Australia, situated 97 kilometres east of Perth and settled on the 16th of September 1831. York was the staging point for early explorers who discovered the rich gold reserves of Kalgoorlie. Population growth was very slow until significant discoveries of gold were made in the 1890s around Kalgoorlie. In 1887, a new constitution was drafted, providing for the right of self-governance of European Australians, and in 1890, the Act granting self-government to the colony was passed by the British Parliament. John Forrest became the first Premier of Western Australia. In 1896, the Western Australian Parliament authorised the raising of a loan to construct a pipeline to transport 23 megalitres of water per day to the goldfields of Western Australia. The pipeline, known as the Goldfields Water Supply Scheme, was completed in 1903. C.Y. O'Connor, Western Australia's first engineer-in-chief, designed and oversaw the construction of the pipeline. It carries water 530 kilometres from Perth to Kalgoorlie, and is attributed by historians as an important factor driving the state's population and economic growth. Following a campaign led by Forrest, residents of the colony of Western Australia voted in favour of federation immigration, resulting in Western Australia officially becoming a state on 1 January 1901. Demographics. Europeans began to settle permanently in 1826 when Albany was claimed by Britain to forestall French claims to the western third of the continent. Perth was founded as the Swan River Colony in 1829 by British and Irish settlers, though the outpost languished. Its officials eventually requested convict labour to augment its population. In the 1890s, interstate immigration, resulting from a mining boom in the Goldfields region, resulted in a sharp population increase. Western Australia did not receive significant flows of immigrants from Britain, Ireland or elsewhere in the British Empire until the early 20th century. At the time, its local projects, such as the group settlement scheme of the 1920s, which encouraged farmers to settle the southwest, increased awareness of Australia's western third as a destination for colonists. Led by immigrants from the British Isles, Western Australia's population developed at a faster rate during the 20th century than it had previously. After World War II, both the eastern states and Western Australia received large numbers of Italians, Croatians and Macedonians. Despite this, Britain has contributed the greatest number of immigrants to this day. Western Australia, particularly Perth, has the highest proportion of British-born of any state, 10.3% in 2011, compared to a national average of 5.1%. This group is heavily concentrated in certain parts, where they account for a quarter of the population. In terms of ethnicity, the 2001 census data revealed that 77.5% of Western Australia's population was of European descent. The largest single group was those reporting English ethnicity, accounting for 733,783 responses, followed by Australian with 624,259, Irish with 171,667, Italian with 96,721, Scottish with 62,781, German with 51,672, and Chinese with 48,894 responses. There were 58,496 Indigenous Australians in Western Australia in 2001, forming 3.1% of the population. According to the 2011 census data, the most common ancestries in Western Australia were English 29.0%, Australian 24.8%, Irish 6.4%, Scottish 6.4% and Italian 3.8%. There were 69,664 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians living in Western Australia in the 2011 census. In terms of birthplace, in the 2011 census 33.2% of the population were born overseas, the highest proportion of any state or territory. People born in the United Kingdom, New Zealand and South Africa were the largest groups of immigrants, accounting for 45% of the state's overseas-born population. Perth's metropolitan area had an estimated population of 1.729 million in 2011. Other significant population centres include Bunbury, Geraldton, Kalgoorlie, Boulder, Albany, Karratha, Broome and Port Hedland. Economy. Western Australia's economy is largely driven by extraction and processing of a diverse range of mineral and petroleum commodities. The structure of the economy is closely linked to these natural resources, providing a comparative advantage in resource extraction and processing. As a consequence, Western Australia contributes an estimated 58% of Australia's mineral and energy exports, potentially earning up up to 4.64% of Australia's total GDP. Gross state product per person is higher than any other state and well above the national average. Diversification over the past 15 years has provided a more balanced production base and less reliance on just a few major export markets, insulating the economy from fluctuations in world prices to some extent. Finance, insurance and property services and construction have grown steadily and have increased the share of economic output. Recent growth in global demand for minerals and petroleum, especially in China and Japan, has ensured economic growth above the national average. Western Australia's overseas exports accounted for 46% of the nation's total. The state's major export commodities include iron ore, alumina, nickel, gold, ammonia, wheat, wool, crude oil and liquefied natural gas. Western Australia is a major extractor of bauxite, which is also processed into alumina at 4 refineries, providing more than 20% of total world production. It is the world's third largest iron ore producer and extracts 75% of Australia's 240 tons of gold. Diamonds are extracted at Argyle Diamond Mine in far north of the Kimberley region. Coal mined at Collie is the main fuel for baseload electricity generation in the state's southwest. Agricultural production in Wa is a major contributor to the state and national economy. Although tending to be highly seasonal, 2006-07 wheat production in Wa was nearly 10 million tons, accounting for almost half the nation's total, and providing $1.7 billion in export income. Other significant farm output includes barley, peas, wool, lamb and beef. There is a high level of overseas demand for live animals from Wa, driven mainly by Southeast Asia's feedlots and Middle Eastern countries, where cultural and religious traditions and a lack of storage and refrigeration facilities favor live animals over imports of processed meat. About half of Australia's live cattle exports come from Western Australia. Resource sector growth in recent years has resulted in significant labor and skills shortages, leading to recent efforts by the state government to encourage interstate and overseas immigration. According to the 2006 census, the median individual income was $500 per week in Western Australia. The median family income was $1,246 per week. Recent growth has also contributed to significant rises in average property values in 2006, although values plateaued in 2007. Perth property prices are still the second highest in Australia behind Sydney, and high rental prices continue to be a problem. Located south of Perth, the heavy industrial area of Kwinana has the nation's largest oil refinery with a capacity of 137,000 barrels of oil a day, producing petrol and diesel for local consumption, along with iron, alumina, and nickel processing plants, port facilities for grain exports, and support industries for mining and petroleum such as heavy and light engineering, and metal fabrication. Shipbuilding and associated support industries are found at nearby Henderson, just south of Fremantle. Significant secondary industries include cement and building product manufacturing, flour milling, food processing, animal feed production, automotive body building, and printing. In recent years, tourism has grown in importance, with significant numbers of visitors to the state coming from the UK and Ireland, other European countries, Singapore, Japan and Malaysia. Revenue from tourism is a strong economic driver in many of the smaller population centres outside of Perth, especially in coastal locations. Western Australia has a significant fishing industry. Products for local consumption and export include western rock lobsters, prawns, crabs, shark and tuna, as well as pearl fishing in the Kimberley region of the state. Processing is conducted along the west coast. Whaling was a key marine industry but ceased at Albany in 1978. Tourism forms a major part of the Western Australian economy, with 833,100 international visitors making up 12.8% of the total international tourism to Australia in the year ending March 2015. The top three source markets include the United Kingdom, Singapore and New Zealand, with the majority of purpose for visitation being holiday vacation reasons. The tourism industry contributes $9.3 billion to the Western Australian economy and supports 94,000 jobs within the state. Both directly and indirectly, the industry makes up 3.2% of the state's economy, whilst comparatively, WA's largest revenue source, the mining sector, brings in 31%. Tourism WA is the government agency responsible for promoting Western Australia as a holiday destination. Government. Western Australia was granted self-government in 1889, with a bicameral parliament located in Perth, consisting of the Legislative Assembly, which has 59 members, and the Legislative Council, which has 36 members. Suffrage is universal and compulsory for citizens over 18 years of age. With the Federation of the Australian Colonies in 1901, Western Australia became a state within Australia's federal structure. This involved ceding certain powers to the Commonwealth Government in accordance with the Constitution. All powers not specifically granted to the Commonwealth remained solely with the state. However, over time the Commonwealth has effectively expanded its powers through increasing control of taxation and financial distribution. Whilst the sovereign of Western Australia is the Queen of Australia, and executive power nominally vested in her state representative, the Governor. Executive power rests with the Premier and ministers drawn from the party, a coalition of parties holding a majority of seats in the Legislative Assembly. The current Premier is Colin Barnett. Secessionism has been a recurring feature of Western Australia's political landscape since shortly after European settlement in 1826. Western Australia was the most reluctant participant in the Commonwealth of Australia. Western Australia did not participate in the earliest Federation Conference. Longer-term residents of Western Australia were generally opposed to federation. However, the discovery of gold brought many immigrants from other parts of Australia. It was these residents, primarily in Kalgoorlie but also in Albany, who voted to join the Commonwealth, and the proposal of these areas being admitted separately under the name Australia was considered. In a referendum in April 1933, 68% of voters voted for the state to leave the Commonwealth of Australia with the aim of returning to the British Empire as an autonomous territory. The state government sent a delegation to Westminster, but the British government refused to intervene, and therefore no action was taken to implement this decision. Local government. Western Australia is divided into 141 local government areas, including Christmas Island and the Cocos Islands. The mandate and operations are governed by the Local Government Act 1995. Education. Education in Western Australia consists of 1 year of preschool at age 4 or 5, followed by 6 years of primary education for all students as of 2015. At age 12 or 13, students begin 6 years of secondary education. The final 2 years of secondary education are now compulsory. From 2005, all students who completed Year 10 were required to undertake further studies in Year 11, and to complete the year in which they turned 16. Since 2008, all students are required to complete 12 years of study before leaving school. Students have the option to study at a TAFE college in their 11th year or continue through high school with a vocational course or a specific university entrance course. There are 5 universities in Western Australia. They consist of 4 Perth-based public universities: the University of Western Australia, Curtin University, Edith Cowan University and Murdoch University, and 1 Fremantle-based private Roman Catholic university, the University of Notre Dame. The University of Notre Dame is also one of only 2 private universities in Australia, along with Bond University, a not-for-profit private education provider based in Gold Coast, Queensland.